There's been a lot of news stories recently saying that AI and AI chatbots are using gobsmacking amounts of electricity. Some articles claim that ChatGPT guzzles 10 times more electricity than a Google search. Another warns that AI's energy appetite is growing so fast that it could surpass bitcoins by 2027. Yikes. So, does asking ChatGPT to write you emails secretly burn as much power as leaving your fridge door open, for example? In this video, I'm going to explain how AI uses energy in the first place, then break down the exact approximation of how much energy a ChatGPT message consumes, using various different models like 4.0, 4.0 mini, o1, and then an image generation. First, we're going to compare the energy usage of single prompts and then the AI industry as a whole to some other scenarios that you might be more familiar with, and then see what you can do to maybe reduce your AI electricity consumption. So, let's see what this funny business is all about. Okay, before I drop the precise numbers, let's set the scene. When you type a prompt into ChatGPT, your words don't just magically turn into an answer. They trigger an activity in a vast network of servers in a data center. Think of a giant warehouse filled with racks of computers humming away, and this setup is generally known as the cloud. And in ChatGPT's case, it's probably owned by Microsoft since they have a big partnership with OpenAI. These data centers are packed with high-performance processors, especially GPUs, or graphics processing units, built by companies like NVIDIA. They're the ultra-high-performance, industrial-grade cousins of the graphics cards that you might find in your gaming PC. Now, each chip can draw hundreds of watts of power, often clustered by the thousands or even tens of thousands. So every time you ask ChatGPT a question, it's basically like calling an army of computers to attention. They all collaborate to generate your answer using electricity in the process. So why do AI chatbots need more power than, a typical Google search? The difference here lies in what's happening under the hood. A search engine mostly retrieves information. It looks at pages and then ranks them, which is relatively light work. But something like ChatGPT, on the other hand, generates a brand new answer from scratch using a massive neural network. Here's an analogy. A Google search might be like asking a librarian for a specific book. Pretty quick and efficient. But a ChatGPT response is more like commissioning an entire team of writers and editors to compose a bespoke book for you right then and there. And clearly that uses more resources. The team of writers here are the layers of the AI model, firing off billions of calculations and then quickly presenting you with an answer. Those calculations happen on GPUs that can each consume, as mentioned, on the order of about 300 to 700 watts, which is comparable to a high-end gaming PC or a kitchen appliance running at full tilt. Now multiply that by many GPUs working in parallel, and you can see why the power demand adds up here. All of those watts going into GPUs don't just disappear. They turn into heat. Lots of heat. Picture touching your laptop during a Zoom call, and then imagine how hot it is, and then scale that up to a big server, and then many of those servers in a rack, and then many of those racks in a building, and then many of those buildings across the world. I think you get the picture. So, to prevent a meltdown here, data centers employ really robust cooling systems. Some use traditional air conditioning, with units blasting cold air through all of the aisles of server racks, which also uses a lot of electricity in itself, and others use advanced water cooling, pumping water through coils or cooling towers to kind of carry away and evaporate heat. Now here, water is so important that data centers have actually also been criticized for drinking local water supplies just to keep servers cool. A little bit more on that later. Essentially, these server farms can be like big computer hot tubs, with ChatGPT relaxing in a consistent bath of chilled water and air to stay comfy. Importantly, the usage of AI is skyrocketing. ChatGPT went from 0 to 100 million users in just a few months, one of the fastest tech adoptions in history, and it's currently still being integrated into more software suites, search engines, and apps, pretty much everywhere, right? More users and more queries mean more total energy consumed in these data centers. Simultaneously, AI models are getting larger and more complex to deliver smarter and more useful responses. Remember GPT-2? Probably not. That was in 2019, and GPT-2 had 1.5 billion parameters. Then came GPT-3 with 175 billion parameters in 2020, which required far more computing power to run, and then by the time that GPT-4 arrived in 2023, OpenAI kept its size fairly secret, but experts guessed that this used in the high hundreds of billions to perhaps even trillions of parameters. Mind-boggling. You don't really have to understand what this means, but just understand this difference in scaling between the three of those. One report suggested that just the training of GPT-4 might have consumed on the order of 62 million kilowatt hours of electricity, which is about what 5,600 US homes use in a year. And that's just for the initial training before it even answers a single question for users. Now, OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, isn't alone. Companies like Google, Meta, and Anthropic all also have their own big models, contributing to the overall energy draw in server farms. And there's also a new twist as well, which is these reasoning models and more advanced features. So OpenAI has introduced more specialized versions of its models aimed at deeper reasoning. They effectively let the AI think for longer about a problem, which is amazing for complex queries, but of course means more computation per answer. It's kind of the equivalent of asking an average student versus a PhD student to solve a problem. The PhD student will do a more thorough job, but they'll take more time and probably drink more coffee as well. And in AI terms, the time and the coffee translates to electricity. Now, of course, none of this is to sound alarmist. Data centers and AI have been a relatively small slice of the global electricity usage, and engineers are constantly improving efficiency, but as AI adoption increases, people and policymakers are paying close attention to its energy footprint. So, let's get down to the burning question in the title of this video. How much electricity does a single ChatGPT message and response use? Okay, time to quantify this in good old watt hours. This is the unit that your electricity company uses to bill you, and 1 watt hour is the energy of using 1 watt for an hour. So for example, an iPhone charger draws around 5 watts, so in 1 hour it uses 5 watt hours. Now that that's been established, how much energy does a single ChatGPT prompt and response exchange consume? The answer has been actually updated relatively recently, but it might actually surprise you. Okay, before I present these, I'd like to thank this amazing article by Josh Yu on the Epoch AI site. This video would not have been possible without that article, so go and read that after you've watched this video. They've even got a spreadsheet with the further calculations of the numbers that I'm about to present. Let's first look at the older estimates from early 2023. Now, a commonly cited figure from a couple of years ago was that a ChatGPT message and response used about 3 watt hours of electricity. Now, in practical terms, 3 watt hours is roughly the energy to run a 60 watt incandescent light bulb for about 3 minutes, or 10 times what a typical Google search uses. Now, this number came from early analyses and got a lot of attention. For example, the Electric Power Research Institute estimated that ChatGPT requests use 2.9 watt hours for each prompt and response versus just 0.3 watt hours for a Google search. No wonder the headlines compared ChatGPT to a power-hungry beast. Tenfold the energy usage of a Google search is a big difference, especially if you're asking it the same questions that you'd usually just put into Google. Now, updated estimates from late 2024 and early 2025 suggests that that 3 watt hour figure was overestimated. So, using more up-to-date info on model efficiency and hardware, Josh Yu at Epoch AI revised that estimate down to about 0.3 watt hours per typical ChatGPT exchange. 0.3 watt hours, an order of magnitude lower than that initial estimate and actually fairly similar to the Google search. So, what changed here? Essentially, everything got better. The AI models got more efficient and the chips also got more efficient. The original estimate had assumed very large outputs per query. By early 2025, OpenAI's main model, which was GPT-4o, was running on much more optimized hardware and producing answers with fewer tokens on average than the worst-case assumptions made a few years ago. So in short, one ChatGPT message likely uses only a few tenths of a watt-hour of energy now. So let's put 0.3 watt-hours in perspective. That's less electricity than a much more energy-efficient 10-watt LED light bulb uses in just 3 minutes. So you'd need roughly 50 to 100 ChatGPT answers to equal the energy required to fully charge a phone battery. And that battery is around 15 to 30 watt-hours for reference. Not too shabby. Your burning questions to the AI aren't exactly burning down the power grid. However, of course, not all prompts are equal. This 0.3 watt hour figure is for the average typical prompt, which is a couple of hundred words or tokens for an answer. If you ask something that yields a really long response, or you have a lengthy back and forth exchange, the energy required per query can be a lot longer. With GPT-4o, you're looking at about 0.9 watt hours for a longer answer, about triple the figure I just mentioned for a shorter one. OpenAI's own data suggests that ChatGPT answers are a few hundred words or tokens long, but if you push the model a little bit more, say beg it to write a 2,000-word essay like a human, it's going to use up much more juice. Now, Epoch AI notes that queries with long inputs or long outputs, especially those using the new reasoning models, may be substantially more energy intensive than 0.3 watt hours and even 0.9 watt hours. For example, a GPT-4o query with a 10,000 token input uses around 2.4 watt hours, and a 100,000 token input could use up to 40 watt hours, which is like running a microwave oven for about 2.5 minutes. It's quite a lot. So really here, a simple question like, what's the capital of France, uses obviously far less energy than explain quantum mechanics and the philosophical implications in the style of Shakespeare. Oh, try saying that 3 times in a row. Or uploading a massive financial report and asking it what meme stocks you should buy. Things like files also use tokens. But now let's talk about the other different models and modes behind ChatGPT, because everyone using ChatGPT is not actually using the same model. So something like GPT-4o Mini, which is a faster and lighter model often used for more quicker responses, this smaller model uses on average about 1/5 the compute power of regular GPT-4o, or about 0.6 watt hours on average. Now, hundreds of prompts on this efficient model might equal the energy of boiling a kettle of water once. It's kind of like the economy car to GPT-4o's big SUV. But if we look at the higher power reasoning models like O1 and the more recently released O3, these are designed for deeper reasoning and do more computing for each answer. For example, using O1 often causes a very lengthy reasoning process to occur, even for just moderate questions. Now, the exact numbers here aren't public, but we're looking at around 3.9 watt hours of usage per query, which is more than 10 times higher than that earlier GPT-4o baseline. And of course, that's also higher than the 2.9 watt hour usage for a ChatGPT prompt from a few years ago. So now we're talking about plugging that same 5 watt phone charger in for around 47 minutes, which can be significant when scaled up. Alright, a very popular feature of using the latest GPT-4o is its ability to handle images and image generation. But this is notoriously also very energy intensive. One analysis by researchers at Hugging Face and Carnegie Mellon found that image generation was the most energy hungry AI workload tested, which makes sense. So here, creating an AI image from text could use as much electricity as fully charging your smartphone. Another study found that popular text-to-image models might produce as much carbon emissions generating 1,000 images as driving a gasoline car for 4 miles. That suggests that a single AI image might be on the order of up to 10 watt hours, depending on the model, of course. So to compare, an elaborate image request via ChatGPT could easily consume 30 times or more the energy of a normal single text response. Now, the good news is that you're probably not generating images as frequently as text, although that Studio Ghibli craze did have a good go. But it's a stark reminder that AI queries are not really created equal, of course, in energy terms. So let's recap. A standard ChatGPT reply, text only via GPT-4o, is around 0.3 watt hours, about the energy to keep a small LED light bulb lit for a couple of minutes. If you ask questions non-stop for an hour, you'd use roughly the same energy as maybe brewing a cup of coffee with a normal electric kettle. An AI-generated image might be more like leaving a really inefficient 60-watt incandescent light bulb on for something like 6 minutes. And if you're using a more advanced reasoning mode that produces really long answers, you might be creeping up to around maybe 2 to 3 to 4 watt hours per query, which is a few seconds of microwave usage. Now really, per person, these numbers are tiny on an individual level, a fraction of a penny in cost, and a fraction of daily household energy usage. But the real impact comes when you multiply this by millions or billions of uses. So let's consider that next. So, in isolation, one AI chat response doesn't use that much energy, far less than even, drying your hair for 30 seconds. But the aggregate of all of this is where things get pretty notable. ChatGPT reached an estimated 200 to 300 million queries per day at its peak. Even at 0.3 watt hours each, 200 million prompts would consume about 60 million watt hours per day, or 60 megawatt hours per day. Over a year, that's roughly 22 gigawatt hours, which is a lot. Now, if we look at the older assumptions, or use estimates for more clever reasoning models at 3 watt-hours each, the figure could have been 226 gigawatt-hours per year. And for context, that's about as much electricity that 20,000 US homes use in a year. Now, with the new estimate, you're looking at about 2,000 US homes, which is a big drop, but not insignificant. Either way, as usage grows, the total draw becomes even more significant. One researcher noted that if all Google searches globally were handled by an AI like ChatGPT, which Google seems to be trying to do, it would use as much energy annually as the country of Ireland. Now, we're obviously not there yet, but you can see why this is drawing in attention. AI isn't some ethereal cloud that runs on magic. It runs on a data center cloud that, of course, is powered by electricity. So here, how does AI as an industry compare to other everyday activities or industries? Now, my favorite example here is tumble dryers. So in the US alone, electric clothes dryers consume around 66 billion kilowatt hours of energy every year. That's 66,000 gigawatt hours. And this is roughly 3 orders of magnitude more than what ChatGPT supposedly uses. And this number was so high that I actually thought it was wrong, but I'll link the research paper in the description so you can have a look for yourself. So here, that's 300 times more energy than what ChatGPT itself is estimated to use. But if we even consider all data centers in general, so all of the world's data centers that power things like AI, streaming, banking, etc., use around 1 to 2% of the global electricity, and AI's portion of that is growing, but it is still a fraction. One recent analysis pegs AI as responsible for around 2 to 3% of the global tech sector emissions. Not total emissions here, just the tech sector. Now, this portion could increase as AI adoption grows, but obviously that context helps. Individual industries like steel, cement, transportation, and even appliances like air conditioners vastly outweigh AI inference right now, just by themselves. But that said, the trajectory of AI usage is upwards, and ensuring that it becomes more efficient is a real concern. The good news here is that efficiency is improving. In just the last 2 years, we've estimated here that OpenAI has cut their per query energy by a factor of 10, from 3 watt-hours to around 0.3 watt-hours. And here, hardware is the big lever. The newest AI accelerator chips from NVIDIA, such as the A100 and H100, deliver much more computation per watt. And on the other side, companies are also optimizing how they run their models, doing things like batching requests, using smaller models automatically where possible, or streamlining computation. Meanwhile, the big tech firms themselves are aware of their carbon footprint, often trying to power data centers with things like renewable energy. Microsoft, for instance, say that they invest in solar and wind energy or renewable energy credits, and they also experiment with things like advanced cooling and like underwater data centers. They're also doing things like using free outside air in cold climates at high altitudes or recycling waste heat to places like swimming pools. So the carbon footprint of each AI query could be shrinking here even if the actual raw electricity usage isn't, because a larger share of that electricity usage might come from renewables. But obviously note here that transparency can be an issue. Obviously, these companies can say these things, even if they might not always be true, and they might not also disclose all of the details. Okay, one more thing to note here. Another overlooked aspect is water usage. The cooling systems for data centers, and thus AI, often use water evaporation to dissipate heat, and the power plants that provide the electricity themselves also use water for cooling. Researchers from UC Riverside estimated around 500 milliliters of water, or a typical 16-ounce bottle for our US friends, was used directly or indirectly for every 5 to 50 queries to ChatGPT, depending on the location and the efficiency. Now, in cooler climates, more queries might translate to that much water, but in hot conditions, just a handful of queries could consume a bottle's worth. Now, obviously, this water is not poured on top of a computer, but it's evaporated in cooling towers or used for the power generation. And what this highlights is that AI's resource footprint isn't just electricity, it's water, and also, of course, land for all those data centers too. So what's the bottom line if you're worried about AI's impact? Using ChatGPT for something like an email or a trivia question has a very small energy cost, on the orders of the hundredths of a penny. But millions of actions also add up. So we know that the AI industry is trying to mitigate some of these impacts, but if you're eco-conscious, you might appreciate that knowing that unnecessary AI usage can be trimmed. So in the UK, there was this funny study done by one of our energy suppliers, OVO Energy, and what they found was that if an adult just sent one less unnecessary thank you email per day, that could save 16,000 tons of CO2 per year, or the equivalent of flying to Madrid 80,000 times. I don't even think there's that many flights to Madrid from the UK. In the same spirit, you don't need to say thanks to ChatGPT after it answers. It hopefully doesn't mind. Skipping trivial or redundant queries is a bit like not leaving a light on in an empty room. Sam Altman himself actually replied to a tweet recently implying that OpenAI has spent tens of millions of dollars on electricity costs from people just saying please and thank you. Now, whether that's actually true or not, who knows, but the cost of it definitely can't be cheap either way. Of course, we're talking about very small savings on an individual level here, but it could be an interesting perspective on digital politeness. So basically, be rude to your AI, and hopefully they won't take over in the future and punish us all for it. Okay, I'm not telling anyone to obviously stop using these AI tools. I use them myself all the time, far from it. The benefits of AI when used for things like work, education, and research can easily outweigh the relatively modest energy costs, especially if those costs are reduced by further hardware and software innovation, and if these AI tools are used for things like, let's say, energy efficiency modeling in large systems. And let's be real, compared to doing things like flying less or ordering less stuff from Amazon, I should probably do that. Using AI responsibly isn't really at the top of an eco-actions priority list right now, but still, it's encouraging to see that the industry is aware of these issues. Each ChatGPT message might be using a pinch of energy and a drop of water, but with smart engineering and sustainable practices from us, we can prevent those pinches and drops from turning into bites and buckets. So, to sum up, a single ChatGPT message likely only uses a fraction of a watt-hour, a trivial amount of electricity thanks to ongoing improvements in AI efficiency. Even the more intensive AI tasks, while of course heavier, are also being optimized. The scare stories of AI consuming as much power as a small country are more about the future scaling if we do nothing to improve efficiency, or if the usage explodes unchecked. In reality, both the industry and researchers are actively making sure that as AI models get smarter, they don't proportionally gulp way more energy. And of course, it's also worth noting that some of the figures that I've discussed today do come with a margin of error. Different sources have slightly different estimates, and companies often keep the exact details of their own AI models under wraps. The 0.3 watt-hour number here is an informed estimate, not the gospel truth. So take specific comparisons here with a bit of a grain of salt. They're more meant to illustrate the scale and, of course, to give you more context and not to be a precise account. If you've enjoyed this little exploration into the energy story of AI, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribing for more content on interesting business topics. Of course, feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear if you were surprised by how little or how much energy Why do I do this? I'd love to hear if you were surprised by how little or how much energy your AI prompts use. And, of course, don't worry. Leaving a YouTube comment probably uses less energy than a ChatGPT message, so go on. Go for it. And of course, leave a like while you're there. Now, on a lighter note, click here to find out why Volkswagen sells more sausages than cars. Yeah, they really do.